Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the doors have closed. I think that signals that we are going to start. And so it is my job. I'm Professor Janet Clinton from the Melbourne Graduate School of Education, and it's my job to welcome you here today. And what I'd like to do is to start with an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as traditional custodians of the land in which we work and we learn. We pay our respects to our elders, past, present, and the place of Indigenous knowledge in our academy. This afternoon, or this evening, early evening, we are going to discuss what I think is not a thorny topic, but a really fascinating topic, which is why schools as community hubs matter to education. And we have three illustrious speakers who are going to challenge us a little bit, I hope, and talk briefly about their experiences and the challenges with setting up schools as community hubs. One of our speakers, Mr. Lachlan Yeates, has COVID and has kindly produced a video, so we won't be able to ask him questions as we go through the panel discussion, but we will be able to contact him later. Now, what I'd like to do is to introduce our speakers just by looking at their bios, just briefly. So we have Justine, and Justine is a principal in residence at the Victorian Academy of Teaching and Learning, and is involved in implementing the inaugural Teaching Excellence Program for teachers from government and Catholic and independent schools. She's a substantive principal of Ivanhoe East Primary, where she's established, and this is, I think, really important, a student-centred collaborative learning community. Something that you might want to talk to Justine about after this. Her leadership prioritises the use of learning environments to provide rich learning experiences for students while maximising connection and engagement within and beyond school community. And this comes to the heart of what this session is about. And over here we have Debra, who, interestingly, I did not know this, Debra, began her career as a chemical engineer and then moved into the school setting and has taught in primary and secondary education across a range of subjects. And over the past 11 years, she's been an assistant principal, a principal of two vastly very different schools, and has gained broad experience as an educator, administrator, and educational leader. She's passionate about equality of access and opportunities in public education. She is currently the principal of Doveton College, providing education, support and services into the community. And Doveton, as many of us would know, is an exemplar of schools as community hubs. So we're really keen to hear from her. Lachlan, who is not with us, began his teaching career as a part of the Teach for Australia program and has worked, and again, I did not know this about Lachlan, as a shearer and worked in the public service. But he's had a range of leadership positions in lower income schools in primary and secondary areas, and now he's currently the principal at Cranbourne Primary School, which is a really diverse community in Melbourne's southeast, and in the early stages, I would argue, of setting up schools as community hub. So there are three speakers. Now, I guess my challenge to you all tonight is to think about what it is you're going to hear. We're going to ask our speakers to talk about their role in setting up schools as community hubs. What are they seeing in terms of the impact? What are the challenges? So what I know as a researcher in this space is there are some amazing examples of schools as community hubs, and we see individuals teachers, students, communities having an impact. It's all in pockets. The evidence is quite scant across. If you looked across all the evidence, you'd go, well, why are we doing this? I want you to hold on to that thought. What's the return on investment for our communities? What's the return on investment for our schools, our teachers, and most importantly, our kids? Now, you're going to have an exemplar over here from Doveton, and hopefully we'll hear some of those things. The other thing that we know is setting up a school as a community hub is an incredibly integrated, complex task. So what do you need to do that? These are the kind of questions that we're going to ask our groups. Now, your job is to think about what are the worth of doing this. Now, from my perspective, having a school as a community hub feels intuitively sensible. But what does the evidence tell us about the impact? And what does it tell us about the merit and worth of such an activity? It questions the role of schools in community. And in our current environment, particularly in relation to COVID, schools have been at the front of communities. Now, does that continue, or do we go back to the norm? So I want you to think about some key questions about where are we heading in terms of the nature of schools? Because if you think about the nature of schools and the role of schools as a community hub, what does that mean for its place in the community? What does that mean for the space that's created in schools? Who owns the space? William Perky once described a good school as a school that is inviting. Its classrooms, its place is open to all. Is that feasible in our environment? So they're the kind of things that I want you to think about. We will walk through we'll ask each of our speakers to speak for about 5 to 8 minutes. We're going to keep questions to the end. Unless you've got a burning desire to ask a question, we can do that. But we want to create some space at the end to have some real discussion. So, as I said, your task is to think about the nature of schools as community hubs, its impact, its worth, for communities, for our kids and for our teachers. And we'll all come back together and hopefully have a good discussion. So what I'd like to do is to ask Justine to kick us off and talk a little bit about what you've been doing. And I think you've got some slides to share.
I do. I might just start. I'll move to the slides just to give you a bit of a visual of what the school looks like. But before I do, it's interesting listening to my colleagues' bios. The three of us are all actually have come to education as a second career. So I have a background in advertising and had a moment where I remembered I wanted to be a teacher, and so I came to the University of Melbourne to become a teacher, and here I am. So I think the questions that have been raised are questions that I've probably grappled with as an educator and then as a leader. And if you were to say to me, you know, what is the role of school in community, I would have said that it's the centre, and I still believe that. But what that actually looks like has probably changed over time. And you know, the question of whether Ivanhoe East Primary School is a community hub, depending upon who you would ask, you would get a different answer, depending upon what their understanding is and their purpose. And if we bring it back to the idea of what is it that our students need, and how can we enhance opportunities for them, and how can we also enhance opportunities for our broader community, what does that actually look like? And I think about when I started at Ivanhoe East in 2016, I, as a new principal, was spending a lot of time working, and I would go into school on Saturday because that was my quiet time to do some reflection and thinking. And what I noticed very, very quickly was that the school was an absolute buzz. There were people everywhere. There were people using the sporting facilities, there were people using the oval, there were families congregating, there were people connecting. And I thought, wow, this is actually really amazing. This is something that I didn't know. But what I quickly discovered was that what I thought was a space that was owned by the whole community was actually owned by a few. If you were a member of the basketball club, it was your place. If you were a part of one of those social groups, it was your space. And what I noticed was that those experiences came back into the school. So it was a place for socialisation, it was a place for playing sport, but what if you didn't fit into either of those? And so what I noticed was that a lot of the students, there were tribes in the school, and it actually really cut to the core of my notion of that sense of connection and belonging for all of our students. So the process came from there, and we're still not there yet, but thinking about creating a space that was for everybody was really, really important. I might just jump to have a bit of a visual so you can have a sense of what the school looks like. I don't think I can talk and click at the same time, so we'll just give it a go. Okay. So what you're looking at is it's an absolutely beautiful school, and I look at those children's faces, and that's the bit where I can get very emotional because it's what we do. It's a beautiful environment, and you can see the love and the care that is given to that environment. We do school really well, but do we do community as well? And creating these opportunities for students. So I'll give you just that sense. Now, if I think about the aim was to build deeper connection as a community, but the place to start was in the classroom. Because the tribes that I'm talking about that came from, depending upon which clique you were in, had an impact on learning. There was exclusion, there was values that didn't necessarily correlate with what, as a school, we were talking about. They weren't the actions and behaviours that we expected. So we started with the learning spaces that we had, but it was really about the pedagogy. And the space that you can see there, the one that's on the far right, was a library, and it was an underutilised library. So we created a learning environment for our Year 6 students where they came together. But of course that had to be very, very purposeful. And sharing the purpose and sharing the vision was very, very challenging, because for a lot of the parents in the community who were deeply embedded in those tribes, they could not see the purpose. Why would we be doing something that's different? And so I could talk for a long time about that. But it became very, very central to the way that we were teaching and the way that the students were learning, placing the students at the centre. What is it that they need? How do we connect them to their learning? How do we connect them with each other? And how do we also connect our teachers to each other so that they can do their best work to support the needs of our students? And then how do we use some of those beautiful spaces outside to actually facilitate that as well, but having that deep sense of connection for our students. And that started within the classroom, then it extended to year levels, then it extended to sub-schools, and then we did something that hadn't been done before at our school, was that we developed a house system. A house system that was actually based on the feedback from the students, was that they wanted it to be based on belonging and connection. So the work that we did started very, very small, but that has become the language that the students use. And that rather than them only connecting with the person that they would spend time with on the weekend, or the person that they would be playing sport with, or the person that their friends, the children of their friends, that they were making connections with children that they hadn't spoken to before. And that really became, and still is, the driving force. So it's a different place, starting inwards to move outwards. Looking here at this oval, this almost represents a community, because the community was very, very passionate about this oval upgrade. And this was when I came to the school, it was about the oval upgrade. And again, it was a group of parents raising money, and this is how we show our sense of community. We are doing this because we want to contribute to the school. But it had to be more than this oval. So the oval has sort of become a symbol of how we come together, and that it is our oval. It doesn't belong to the people who paid the most money for it. Moving from that sense of entitlement to that sense of ours. Doesn't matter who you are, where you've come from, who you play with, what you do on the weekend, that this is our space. So when we sort of think about one of the things that happened through the communication, the action of focusing on our community, is that parents came forward who perhaps were not typically given opportunities to contribute to the school, because the way that you would contribute to the school would be through fundraising or by attending a social event. That the power of our parents, who perhaps were really quite brave into stepping into a space where they perhaps didn't feel welcome, that they were the ones who were leading things like our gardening club. And it was one of the most beautiful things. All I had to say was yes. I didn't do anything else. I take no credit. But a small group of passionate parents who knew the importance of community, but also wanted to do something that was bigger than themselves, created really beautiful things that have continued. And I don't want to go into the metaphors of the garden, but really it's grown. And the work has continued to grow, and it is then linked to learning, that students are actually engaged in learning through the garden. So slowly it filters through, because it's been guided by the children, because they're making connections with something other than what was on offer before. Learning that was isolated, connection to the school that was based on what types of things you did and who you knew. So I think that that's sort of a part of the story, and there is still work to do. And the next layers were bringing in the local kindergarten. How might you use the spaces for the benefit of the kindergarten children, but the connections that the kindergarten teachers could make with our prep teachers? How can we support transition? The development of transition programs that were just much about supporting the parents to connect with the community as it was about familiarising the children with what school was like. Building some expectations about what our values are, who we are and what we stand for, by the actions that we would take. So slowly getting to this place where what we talk about when we're talking about our community is that it is our community, and it doesn't have to look one particular way, that it is a welcoming place, that it acknowledges difference, and it actually sees difference where before it assumed that everybody was the same. So I think that is a bit of a snapshot. The one piece that I would like to add is that we were very, very fortunate, actually a deep sense of gratitude, a deep sense of privilege that we have in our school. But we were able to take the facilities of a school that closed down next to us, and that became another place of being able to build connection. And in terms of the next steps of building a community hub, it really starts from there. And then 2020 hit. But really, it's primed and ready to engage the school community, including the students, the parents, and our teachers, to be able to connect more broadly, so that we can give our students who really have a deep sense of privilege some access to experiences where they can learn from others, but where they can also contribute to the broader community, because that's a really important piece for our particular context.
You heard some really interesting things. I want you to hold on to a couple of things that I noted from that. One was the idea of it starting in the classroom. So where does a community hub start? The other one you mentioned is the notion of the classroom learning environment, creating that environment, which is not just about space, but what you do, but it is about the design, it is about the facilities and how you use them. There were a couple of times where I wanted to say, come on, you're kidding me, Justine, really, that all you had to do was say yes. Now, I think we might come back to that one because I'm not sure, as a leader in a school, how do you get to a point where you just say, yeah, go do it, and they go and do it? I don't know about where you work, but certainly that doesn't happen at the University of Melbourne either. So that's an interesting one, I think. And then I guess the other thing is the oval fascinates. You can see that picture there. The oval it's become a symbol. The design of the oval, it could just be a beautiful oval that somebody has put there, but it's become something else for you. And I'm fascinated how that might have happened. So I think that was important. And I think the last thing I took out of this is starting in the classroom. You mean the journey's still going? There's no end to this? These are things that, again, we might want to question and think about as we go forward. What we might do now is move to Lachlan, who has kindly, in his flushed COVID state, you'll notice he's a bit flushed in the video. He has prepared a video for us. And remember, Lachlan is the principal of Cranbourne Primary School with a really different area, really different context. And he's just beginning the journey. And I wonder if he's going to have something different to say. Cranbourne is a really diverse community. So we might start the video.
Hi everyone, my name's Lachlan Yeates and I'm the principal at Cranbourne Primary School. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but unfortunately I'm home in isolation due to a case of COVID. But I am really excited to tell you about my school and the improvement journey so far. At the end of the presentation, I'll have my contact details, so if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me. Cranbourne Primary School is a smaller primary school in Melbourne's southeast with around 250 students. We've got an ICSIA of 960, which places in a lower SES bracket and represents some of the high diversity but lower incomes that a lot of our parents and families have. We've faced some shrinking enrolments over the last 10 years or so as a number of new schools are built surrounding us and our zone is limited to the centre of the older part of Cranbourne. In addition to that, because we're the oldest school in Cranbourne, we also have quite old buildings and the maintenance of these is another factor that places downwards pressure on our budget. As a school, we've had a relatively low teacher turnover, but we've had a high leadership turnover, particularly amongst the middle leaders. Myself, I came in about 12 months ago into the school with a broad mandate for change due to quite a few data sets that needed significant improvement. The hub is really important to our school, but it is only one part of our school improvement journey. We see our school improvement journey as a tapestry and each thread supports the other parts. Listed here, you can see some of the approaches that we've been focusing on as a school to try and lift our student achievement in partnerships with activities like our community hub. Our hub was built out of our involvement with the Refugee Education Support Program back in 2019. This was a program run in partnership with Foundation House, designed to work out how schools can best support refugee students, of which our school had a really high proportion. Based on this, it morphed into an interest in this area, culminating in our being successful with the Community Hub grant with Community Hubs Australia at the end of 2020 for implementation in 2021. This was around the time that I became principal, and while the hub had failed to start, we got it going in the second half of 2021. With this support from Community Hubs Australia comes 3 years worth of funding that winds down over time. So the hub is fully funded for the first year and a half and then over time the funding amounts decrease on a 6-monthly basis until the school is supporting the hub entirely by itself. In addition, we also receive coaching and support from a Smith family facilitator who's employed by Community Hubs Australia, and she works with both the hub coordinator along with other hub coordinators in the area and the principals of community hub schools in our area. Our community hub is open 3 days a week, and our community hub coordinator is a vital part of that. In addition to running programs, she organises grants and works on the admin side of keeping the hub running. The programs we run include adult English language programs, a playgroup, information sessions, technology lesson, and a regular women's morning tea. Of our attendees, about 90% are women who have come to Australia from Afghanistan, and surprisingly, only 50% of them are parents of the school, with the remainder being other community members who joined. This outside school group was particularly pronounced during COVID, when people could join the program virtually and then migrate into coming in person. In terms of the impact, we've seen a lot of positive impacts across the school over the last year. In our NAPLAN results, our grade 5 had the highest results in the decade. In regards to internal data, our preps read better after one term than the previous cohort did after an entire year. Anecdotally, our parents, staff and students are more positive about the school than they were previously, and our enrolments have picked up for the first time in 6 years. That said, across all of this improvement, a lot of it relates to those other improvement measures we discussed earlier, and some of the benefits of the hub are a little bit harder to measure. So given this, if the hub only has minimal impact on some of these areas, why is it worth supporting? Well, first of all, it's a moral good all by itself. So for example, just last week, Pauline Richards, our local state MP, came out to talk to the parents about the Power Saver bonus, and she got onto the topic of breast cancer, and parents were able to translate for each other and have a conversation with her about the information related to breast cancer. And Cranbourne actually has the highest incidence and mortality rate in Australia for breast cancer. Through that conversation, they were able to organise an information session with a translator, which will be coming up in the coming weeks, followed by a trip with a medical van and a translator included who can be used to support those women. Now, this doesn't help our students directly, but that said, there's no doubt that it was a really powerful moment that will help people in our community. The second reason is that while we're not seeing immediate impacts, there will be longer term benefits as time plays out. Those students who are going to a playgroup now, over time, will become students in the school, and they'll be better set up and better prepared to be successful in school. Likewise, if we can support families with their English language skills or getting job ready, that will likewise support our students in ways that will be difficult to measure, but over time will certainly pay off for our students and their families. And finally, with our shrinking zone, keeping a manageable enrolment pool is really important to us so that we can continue to offer a range of programs. We see the Community Hub as a selling point for the school, something we're proud at, and an opportunity for parents who might not otherwise be thinking of enrolling their children to come into the school and see what we can do for them. When it comes to barriers and enablers, I can't understate the importance of funding. As a school, we have a lot of priorities that we're trying to improve at the moment, and it can be really challenging to work out which area is going to give us the best bang for our buck. The funding for Community Hubs Australia gives us a mandate to get started with our Community Hub work and buys us the time we need to identify other sources of revenue or ways of justifying the cost of running the hub. That could be through additional enrolments, or it could be through finding additional grants that can keep the hub running. As you also saw, as a school, we're trying to improve a lot of things, and we need really tight implementation to manage it effectively. As a smaller school though, we've only got a small leadership team, so spreading ourselves across multiple priorities can be challenging. The hub is another area of the school that does impact on our time as a leadership team and takes more effort to keep focused on. That said, we feel it's so important, it's really important to prioritise, and by identifying a really strong hub coordinator, it takes away a lot of the headaches that we would otherwise face. One of the areas that we've been working on is the cultural shift in the school. And I think the best way of characterising that is moving from a deficit to a strength-based view of our community. And that occurs in multiple different levels across the school and in multiple different sectors of our parent body. And finally, we recognise that this is a long-term project. So that means we need to make sure we're investing and staying in it for the long haul so that we can get those benefits that might not be coming this year or next year, but will be coming down the track and will help support our school. Finally, if there's any questions at all, I'd really encourage you to shoot me an email on the address you can see on the screen. I love talking about my school, and I'm happy to spend as much time as you'd like discussing what works and what doesn't in our context and go into more detail about our school's community hub. Thank you.
Let me say on the video, thank you, Lachlan. Really appreciate your comment. Did you all go, well, hang on, is this really a community hub? Because it was so different to what Justine was talking about. So what does that mean for schools as community hubs? Can they be different? Are they a thing? Or is it a mindset? I looked at at Lachlan's video and went, oh my goodness, look at all the work they are doing in that school. And I wonder whether he would say, I just say yes and it happens. I suspect not. Keeping in mind this is the beginning of the journey. One of the things that I think that's important with the connection that you just had with Lachlan is thinking about the difference to what Justine was talking about. But they're actually coming from the same angle, I think. What I loved about what Lachlan was saying is we didn't have data. But now we've got promising data. I'm not quite sure what promising data actually means, but promising, limited but promising, starting to see impact. And that's really quite exciting, I think. But the question you should perhaps be thinking about is where we started. If this is a little pocket of something that's very different but exciting, then how do we bring it all together to generalise to the worth of schools as community hubs if they are so different in different contexts and data is limited? So I think that was a really important thing. The connection was that cultural mindset that he talked about. And I wonder if that comes before when you just start compared to where you are. So some interesting things for you to think about going forward. And look, it's a perfect segue to Debra, isn't it? Because of the work of Doveton and what it's been doing. Once again, different. So, Debra, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I hate going last because if I went first, I could say what I wanted to say without having to reflect. So I think what I would say to begin with is Doveton's been on this journey for 10 years and we are in a very different place because of that. We've had 10 years of experiences and let me assure you, not all positive, but every experience is a learning opportunity and I think we've learnt from that. So if we start with just some, there we go, statistics around the school. So we have an early learning centre that is part of the college. So I run that. Those people work for the Department of Education and Training. It is not a third-party provider, which is quite unusual. So that is part of our college. At the moment, there's about 80 kids in there. We wish there was a lot more, but I think COVID has stopped people sending their little children back. We've got 630 children in the school, which goes from prep to year 9. Yes, year 9. You're wondering why do we not go to year 12? Me too. But someone decided that before I got there. So we finish at year 9. There's a little gap and then we have about 180 adult learners across the course of the year. So their courses may not be a year long. Most of them are doing English, but sometimes we have hospitality, food handling, classroom support, that kind of stuff. 130 staff, and at the moment 40 registered volunteers. That used to be 90. So pre-COVID it was 90. Again, those volunteers have dropped off. If we have an evacuation, like we did last week, a drill, when we do that drill, there can be 1,000 people we have to account for. So they are the visitors and the people who are in the college, as well as those who belong there every day. So there's a lot of stuff happening every day, a lot of things going on. For me, what characterises Doveton College? I first started there in 2016, so the college opened in 2012. Every school tells you we are passionate about our kids. The kids are really important. That every school tells you that. But when I went to Doveton, it was lived. Like every single kid was important, and every single kid's family was important, and that was a big difference. Our moral purpose is not just for the children, it's for the children and families of Doveton. And we talk about that all the time. We are here to empower the children and families of Doveton. So we talk about that a lot, we live that, and we understand that. So that is a little bit different in our setting, that clear understanding it's about children and families, not just children. So this is a slide that I use to help people understand what it is we've done to create that whole community. So remember that this is over 10 years. So that first thing there, a single entrance with community access. So that entrance is open, it's welcoming, it's spacious. There's some tables and chairs and a little coffee bar, so people can come in, they can sit down, they can have a cup of coffee, it's free. And next to that, those tables and chairs is the community team. So they can come out and talk to people, ask them, do you need help getting a job? Have you got housing? Do you want to do some adult education courses? Blah, blah, blah. The community team sit there to do that. Behind those tables and chairs is a myriad of consulting suites where we have health and allied health services. But that single entrance, then you go the other way to the school, that single entrance is really important. The two most important people in the college sit there, and they're the people who greet and welcome everybody who comes in. One of my receptionists wears a headscarf and speaks 9 different languages, and that is so absolutely essential in our community, who speak 54 different languages in their homes. And even if she doesn't speak their language, she can help them with that communication. It's just a welcoming thing. Really importantly in our community is that people don't have to repeat their stories over and over. So this is a disadvantaged community with a high level of trauma. So we have a very strong philosophy around that one story, one time. So when people come to the college for whatever reason, usually it's to enrol their kids in school. We do an enrolment meeting, and that's where we capture their story. We don't ask them to repeat it to the classroom teacher, to the wellbeing team, to the community, blah, blah, blah. We do it one time. And then if you go down to the bottom right, referrals, we do that warm referral to services they need. So that means we don't give them a card and say, ring this number. We say, hang on a second, I'll go get the community team. Hang on a second, I'll go organise your appointment with the paediatrician. And if you're going to see the paediatrician, I'll introduce you, or your classroom teacher will. So nobody's cold meeting, and nobody's asked to take a phone number and make a phone call, because they might never do that. Like, we make that connection. A lot of work, but we make it. High quality explicit teaching and the focus on quality, so that's what both Justine and Lachlan talked about. It starts in the classroom, it starts with high quality, and it's not high quality yesterday and the day before, it's high quality every day, and it's getting better at your craft. So today you're good, tomorrow you're going to be better, and you've got to keep getting better, and you've got to keep innovating, creative and improving. We have a massive adult education program and the volunteer program. Probably about 85% of the participants in our adult education are parents, and they can bring their young children in, and there's child minding provided for those kids while mostly mums, but some dads now, are doing their learning. We would like those young children to be going to the early learning centre, but that's kind of the next step, or to playgroups. We have a lot of playgroups as well. In the adult education piece, although this is hard to measure, and I don't know how you measure the impact of this, but it's so valuable, when they finish, we have a graduation ceremony during the school day and the kids come and see mum and dad graduate. And that is, I'm telling you, the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, and the kids are so proud. The other thing that happens is the adult education is on site during the school day, so the kids come and visit mum and the little brothers and sisters when they're at recess and lunch. So that is also a beautiful integration of the adult learning and the school learning. We have a zillion partnerships that I'll talk about in a moment, but not just educational partnerships. So we have a massive health and allied health program, so lots of organisations there. We do lots of research work with different tertiary institutions, and a lot of connections with different philanthropic groups, which is important for us because, as Lachlan said, funding matters and you need it. One of the other important things for us is this notion of the extended day. So when the college opened, 7% of kids did anything outside of school. So they'd go home, I presume they played Game Boy or did graffiti, which was a problem. They don't have enough money to do club sports. There's not a whole lot of interest in things like scouts, things like that. Strong connections with their churches, but that's generally on the weekend. So we offer a program every day of the week where all the children can sign up to do an activity for another hour. It's totally free. A lot of sports, but there's also robotics, leadership courses for the older kids, craft, floristry, African drumming, which was on today. The guy didn't show up. Someone called me on the way here and said, could I take the African drumming? No, I can't. All sorts of things like that, with the purpose of having something for children to do, but also developing their passion and their skills. So our kids are really good at soccer, and we've had lots of external coaches doing the soccer program who then support the kids into club soccer, which is what we want. So that's a really important part of our work as well. So they're kind of, key aspects of what makes it work for us. And I say again, we've been doing this for 10 years, so it's not like we just said, yeah, we're going to introduce all of these at once. We did not. This is over a period of time. So if you look at it in another way, we have the early years, which is the Early Learning Centre. We sometimes run a baby college, not all the time, but that's for pregnant mums in their second and third trimester, and it's just about helping them to understand what they're going through and what they will go through, so what happens when they give birth and how to support their young babies and encourage them to enrol in playgroups. So we have that in the early years. We have an extraordinary health and wellbeing program. So we have a shared care model on site with a doctor and paediatrician. So we don't qualify for doctors in schools because I don't have any year 10 children. So we have got the GP to come in with a shared care model with the paediatrician. Means our kids can see a paediatrician within 6 weeks. So that's, in current times, pretty extraordinary. That means we can get them assessed, we can get them supported, and we can get the funding that they need to support them in their learning. Monash Health are a big partner of us, so they have physios, OTs, speechies, nutritionists. We have a gait clinic. We also have maternal, child and health on site. They have a lactation clinic. We have counsellors. We have Foundation House, Ways. Probably there's about 80 different organisations across the week. They come to the college. They have a room. It's just like a doctor's consulting suite. So we've got 3 of those, and then other meeting rooms. They don't pay us anything. We don't pay them anything, but they have a constant stream of clients, which is great. They don't have to organise them. We organise them for them. Their day is full. There are very few no-shows. our kids can go and see their service and then they go back to class. They don't have the whole day off, they don't have half a day off. And all of our arrangements with these providers are on the basis of a shared care model where we are sharing the information, we're having collaborative care teams wrapped around the child and the family, and if the therapist that they're seeing is away, it doesn't matter because the teacher continues to implement the strategies that the child needs. So it's really fantastic. But 10 years of work, I stress. And we have about 90 kids a day who go to breakfast club. We have the school sector. School is super important. We all talked about that. Underlying the work in the school for us is the Berry Street education model. So all of my staff have a really deep, rich understanding of trauma-informed practice, and that has contributed to their confidence and competence in dealing with tricky kids with significant trauma backgrounds. And then in the community, I've talked about DEEP is that extra hour in the school day, adult learning. Men and Women of Doveton, I'll just mention that as an example of a great community experience. So Men and Women of Doveton is based on the Sons of the West program that the Western Bulldogs did a few years ago. So it's a 12-week program. We started it with men because it's hard to get men involved, much easier for women. So it's a 12-week program. In that program is a physical activity. So they did rugby and AFL, soccer. Every week they have to do something physical. A psychologist attends every session and they have a speaker comes and talks about all different things. So he talks about family violence, talks about mental health, talks about nutrition, goes for about 3 hours a week. First program we ran, 15 people signed up, 15 people graduated, and they get up on the stage at the end and they have a little graduation ceremony. And the men were asked, did anyone want to say anything? And they all said, absolutely not. And then one bloke said, oh, I want to say something. He said, I've lived here for 12 years, and he said, I've never had a friend until I did this. And like, if there's a reason to do that work, it's that. Imagine living somewhere and never having a friend. So he's got friends now. Monash Monash University did a study on the impact of the Men and Women of Doveton, so like an independent study, significant benefit on homelessness and employment. So it really made a difference to those. So the men did it, and then the women came to us and said, what's going on, why can't we have it too? So they had that. We have a little social enterprise where some of the women made a kitchen and they used to cook us food on pre-COVID. They'd cook food Thursday night, we'd buy our meals, and it, you know, not for profit. Yeah, it was great. And just my last picture is just some of the partnerships that we have that are, you know, not just educational partnerships, but these are the people we partner with so we can provide that whole community experience. Not all of our partners, there are more. But a snapshot.
Thank you for that. Wow. Again, completely different, 10 years, whole kit and caboodle going on over there. So we've got about 10 minutes left where it's your turn. And what we're really, really keen to do is to start a conversation, just thinking about what you've heard from our three speakers and some of the challenges we gave to you. So, first cab off the rank. Who's got a question to ask? Yay.
I think I can be loud enough, if that's right. So I've just started as Head of Community Engagement at Lachlan College, and we're actually just about to kick off a journey with our community. I guess I specifically wanted to dive into the pedagogy piece, because what does that look like? You know, what does it actually look like entrenching community and social impact in pedagogy? You know, we're prepped through to Year 12. So, yeah, any tips and hints would be welcome.
Watch us sliding over.
We are a bit. If I can say from my perspective that pedagogy is everything, And the starting place is always the students. And from my perspective of, I didn't establish the context of Ivanhoe East Primary School, but when I started, it's very high SES school, around about 550 students. A school that had been working very much in silos, so not very much shared practice. But the starting point was actually the why we're here and focusing on students. And from then it was actually a co-design based on evidence. And from the perspective of building leadership capacity and building a shared understanding about why, and then that co-design of what is our pedagogy and engaging students in that process to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And from there, it actually established a culture that was responsive. And, I can talk about what the pedagogy looks like in practice, but the how was actually more important. So placing the students at the centre, involving them, providing agency, and we can have another conversation about student voice and agency at another time. But if you focus on agency, what does it actually look like? What does it mean? What is the practice in the classroom? Why do we do what we're doing? And ongoing conversations to co-design that.
What was your why?
It's a pretty simple why. The first question that we asked, and it took 18 months to get the answer that we really wanted, so that everybody had an understanding, is why are we here? And we asked everybody, students, teachers, parents, and through a really long process, we came up with 2 reasons. It was to make friends and to learn. It was really simple. But really what sat underneath that was that sense of belonging, which is actually where the community hub comes in.
Yeah, and we talk about all the time, ours is about social, emotional and educational learning. So it's not just the educational piece. And for us, that foundation around Berry Street, and we use Berry Street, you can have different things, but that foundation, which is about every child matters, every child's different, and you cannot do your best work unless you know about every child, and you got to go beyond the classroom. So if you want to know every child and give every child what they need, you have to know their family, and the family has to be part of it. You can't just do it with the 25 kids sitting in front of you. It's got to be about their families and their lives.
I would have to add, as an educator, it's about high impact teaching, but it's more about, sometimes I don't care how you teach. It's just ensuring that you know and understand you are having an impact on every child, and that every child needs to move forward. So you mentioned...
Yeah, and a real focus on growth. We focus on growth, not on outcomes, because let me tell you, our academic outcomes aren't fabulous, but our growth is amazing. Yeah. It's all about growth and celebrating growth and helping people understand, not just the kids, but mums and dads, how important growth is. Like, we've got a big focus at the moment on helping kids fall in love with their own data, and helping kids understand where they're at and where they're going, and that improvement piece.
This is a really important point, I think, without getting stuck in education. A community hub in a school is still a school. It's still about learning. So where's your best conduit to bring the community in? And I think that's a really, really important point. But it's really hard work. Pedagogy and community together. Oh, big words.
Can I just make a comment on that? That I remember one of the first conversations I had with our team was all about the relationships. And all of this actually is what we're talking about, is that relationships matter, and you can't do the rest of it without them. And so the relationships that happen in the classroom between teachers and their students, the relationships between students, between families, it is everything. So with the relationship comes the learning. So that if there is one piece, to me, it's about relationships matter and it's everything.
And I guess creating that mindset for that relationship, and that environment is the critical part. Okay, another question. We might go to the one at back and then Ben. Yeah.
It's fantastic the work you're doing, but given the level of education we have nationally in this country, how do we seriously get to the quality of teaching and that we see in many other Western countries? I mean, at the moment, your work's fantastic, but to be able to get that around the whole of the country, that's the missing link, isn't it?
I think the answer across Western countries, and maybe not so many Western countries, is quality teaching. That's what it's about. Quality teaching, and then providing the environment so that our teachers, and it's actually not about the teaching, it's quality teaching and learning, but our students developing a learner disposition. And I think that's very clear. I think the evidence is clear, putting the resources, creating the environment so that, and ensuring that our teachers are celebrated and their expertise.
We need to bring teaching up to the level that it needs to be as a profession to be able to
You've got 3 educators sitting in front of you. I think absolutely.
I think the other thing too is we spend a lot of time with our pre-service teachers as well, and the thing that I say to our mentors is, listen, you have to make sure that these guys have the best experience. I want them to leave their teaching round saying, yep, I've made the right choice, I want to be a teacher, because they're in a great environment, because they see the benefits, because they get the joy of doing the good things. Part of that's part of it too, is creating the environment where teachers experience the joy of teaching and it's not a grind, so they want to stay, but also imparting that to the next generation of teachers and making sure pre-service teachers are loving it right from the get-go.
And if I can just add that, bringing it back to relationships, that every one of my teachers knows that I love them. And I genuinely love them and hold them in such high regard for the work that they do. And every teacher turns up to do their very, very best every day. Some days are ordinary, some days it all goes out the window. But if we create an environment that challenges, supports, has really high expectations, but a lot of work to support, to improve, to keep focusing on that excellence. But I come from a deep place of genuine love and care for my teachers, and I want them to bounce into the school and to bounce home knowing that they've actually had an impact and to know what that impact is.
Ben?
Thanks, Jan. Probably a question for Debra. Doing the Building Connections project, one of the challenges that comes up over and over again through the data we're collecting is concern for safety and security in schools. Now, you've got almost 200 adults on campus most days. Can you talk to that? How do you do that? Because this is one of those things that people say, oh yes, but.
Yes, they do say exactly that. So we have been doing this work for 10 years, and it's really important to understand that. And if you were to say what is the single thing, the single biggest differentiator in those 10 years, it's trust and confidence. So we have, over 10 years, built trust and confidence in and with our community. So there were a lot of leaps of faith there. So we have never had locked doors, never ever. We have that open area. People have to sign in for sure, but if you come to the school with purpose to do something, you sign in. If you know where you need to go, we let you go do what you need to do. If you don't know what you're doing, we'll take you where you need to go. And we're very transparent. It's not a secret what happens. The classrooms are not closed doors. If you're worried about your kids, you want to see what they're doing, sure, we'll take you. You can have a look, but please don't interfere with the teaching and learning. If you want to volunteer, more than happy to have you volunteer. We put you through a little program. We have a third to a half of our kids are known to child protection. So we have a lot of intervention orders and a lot of access restrictions. But we have very, very few problems with that because everybody understands the kids are at the centre, the kids' safety is the most important thing. So at any sign of trouble, the first person who would tell me would be another parent. So I've been there since 2016. I've called the police a few times, but not in an out of control fashion. It's like someone will come to me and say, someone's here who shouldn't be, right? Quickly picked up. It's like, excuse me, you shouldn't be here. I call the police, escort them off. So it's never ended up in a big to-do. Nobody's ever been arrested. And it's really that trust and transparency that's got us there. Some of my nearby schools, you go to reception. I went to one school, there's a sign that it says, if you speak rudely to my staff, I'll call the police. And I'm like, well, it doesn't, you show up there, that's the first thing you read. If you're rude, we'll call the police. So I'm thinking about being rude then. And it's a locked door. Literally the reception area is locked. Someone has to come with a key and let you in. And it's like, my God, what's happening behind those doors? So we're not like that. We've been open, we've been transparent. In the early days when I got there, we had some feisty parents, right? And it was like, I can see you're upset, come in, let's talk about it. So those parents now, they'll ring me up and they'll say, listen, here's the problem, sort it out, will you? Like, they don't need to come in anymore. They know we'll sort it out. They know we'll tell them. But it's 10 years of that trust and transparency. But as soon as you have a secret, as soon as you're not transparent, then that all goes out the window. So, and there's some leaps of faith there, but if you take that leap one way, it'll come back at you. That's what we've found.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions. We've got one at the back and then Katina. Yeah? Oh, Katina?
Thank you. So my question is about replication skills. And all three schools are so different, yet, our possibility is so incredible. So my question is the how something that each school just needs to discover on their own, or is there a recipe that we could learn from to accelerate the learning to other schools?
It's a great question. I'm sitting here and, listening to Lachlan and to Deb speak, I'm thinking, wow, in terms of what it is that they've been able to achieve. And I would dare say that the intention, the vision is the same, but it's context specific. I look at all of those things and, they're certainly a part of my vision, but my community doesn't need all of those things. They need different things. So I would be thinking that in terms of the process, you have to start with your context and bringing it back to the why and what is it that's important for your school and your community. There will be natural steps that are about clarity of vision, engaging the community with the development of the vision. And, as Deb was talking about that transparency and that continual focus of actually creating it together, I think is important. So there's some of my thoughts.
Yeah, context is everything. So it's not a one size fits all. However, having said that, so initially Doveton College was supported through Julius Coleman and the Coleman Foundation, a philanthropist. And in 2017-18, the Our Place organisation was set up. So Doveton is the lighthouse school for Our Place. And the intent of Our Place is to replicate the Doveton experience in similar disadvantaged communities. And there's certain characteristics of the community that need to be in place for the Doveton model to work. So we couldn't take what we do and put it in Justine's school. It would be ridiculous. But Our Place intention is to identify those similar communities. So there's 10 sites have been identified. And from the work that we've done, the things that have worked well and the things that haven't, we've got Our Place have developed some of those, the things that will work, like the must-haves. And I would say one of the must-haves you have, no matter where you are, is that welcoming entrance. Like, no matter what your building looks like, you have to have an entrance that welcomes people. So don't put a sign up that says, don't swear at my staff. Like, that's not going to work. And that will look different, but the notion of, like, the very explicit thinking around what does a welcoming entrance look like? Justine had some pictures of her gardens. I have gardens like that as well. You know, like what does that look like? We have a lot of Indigenous kids, so we have an Indigenous garden, we have a yarning circle. That's welcoming for that community. We have some, Middle Eastern paintings and stuff that's welcoming for the Middle Eastern community. So, those, it will look different, but it's the intent behind it. So our place have a lot of those principles that they've developed through our work to apply to similar communities, but the characteristics of those communities match ours, which is the context.
So I guess the important thing that you're suggesting is scale is about the must-haves. There are some things, regardless, across the three that we've heard that you must have, the welcoming thing. I'd probably argue the leadership, etc.
I think you need, and we've all talked about the classroom. Like, you can't escape the fact that the school is at the centre. So you must have that high quality teaching and learning. Like, that's a real must, wherever you are, regardless of the context. But what that looks like, how that plays out will be different. Like, Justine's kids are so different to mine, but nevertheless, that high quality teaching is absolutely essential in understanding those children, what they need, and getting them to the next step. And it's also, the leadership and the philosophical understanding and the moral purpose. You've got to have a real moral purpose behind that. And if it's not your philosophical understanding, it's going to be really challenging.
Thank you. We have another last question, I think.
My next session is my interest is so it's probably physical space rather than education side. I guess I'm interested in sort of activating and visualised spaces. And I see a lot of schools that visualised spaces. They're just walk past through schools and like here, we have pretty good fences and catwalks and all sorts of stuff up pretty good. So I guess my question to you, I'm assuming you are unlocking the fences.
So I knew someone would say this. We actually, we do have a fence which is locked, well, not locked, but it's closed because we have a lot of little cherubs who like to run home. So we actually have to close it during the day so they don't run home. It's not that school's not a great place, but they do like to run home even though we're in August still. So we do have, but we have these massive sliding gates. So when they're open, it's open, it looks open, but we can lock it.
It's actually really, it's a question that's actually very, very close to my heart because it was a question that would come up pretty much every year. Why isn't there a fence around the school? What are you doing to protect the students? How on earth can you not have a gate at the front of the school locked? And number of reasons why not. And one of them is how I started, is that it's a place that people come to. And, during COVID, that 1 hour that people were able to get out of the house, that's where they were. That's where people were connecting. It is actually the safest place to be when everybody is there. We had a number of very bored young people during COVID, and my heart went out to them for everything that they were having to endure, and they were misbehaving big time at the school. Now, there was a lot that we couldn't do for the damage that they were causing, but locking the school wasn't going to be the answer to it, but having more people around was actually protecting our space, our community space. That to me is the answer. It's our space.
Today, what sort of resonated with you mentioned, we want to create inviting space and community, schools and defence and sort of inviting space. We also sort of know that the majority of primary schools, particularly majority of people walking distance to the school, and in most cases, that's probably the only space where they can play basketball or hang out and play around and get a lot of that. So on a mission to try to basically move the dial here. But one of the structural issues that I think we have is that the system in Victoria is such that it essentially puts the onus on local decisions think that, from my perspective, it's really important about 2.5 hours in school and get to say, I said this.
It takes, it always goes back to the moral purpose and goes back to the relationships and trust. And, you know, every context is going to be different. You know, we could lock the gates, but the reason why we would lock the gates is to get the young people off the roof and causing the damage that they've been causing. But they're so good at climbing, the gates would not make any difference. So it would be a lot of money.
And our gates are closed during the school day, so the kids don't leave. But during the weekend, they're open, and all of our playing spaces, fields, play equipment and stuff are the other side of the gates.
Let me just raise an issue as well. I just spent a little bit of time in the US, and there was discussion about school safety, teaching, and how schools in the US can survive given all the horror of the school shootings. So we had at the conference that I was at, all the schools are locked, right? We're talking security guards, the whole thing. They're not welcoming. And one of the keynotes at the conference said the answer is about humanity. And if we can change the mindset so it is everybody together and it's all about humanity, then we can pull down the walls. And the secret was pulling down the walls. It's exactly what you've said. The space, if it's not welcoming, if there's secrets behind the door, then it is no longer safe. So the US is doing some schools as community hubs, wraparound schools. It's hard work. So given the time, we might close there, and all that's left for me to do is to say thank you. We could talk all night. There are so many things that we could talk about. We really appreciate it. We appreciate those of you who aren't educators in this space allowing us to talk about education in this space and the connection. But it has been such a pleasure. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming out on a Thursday night, and I trust the rest of your week will be wonderful. Thank you.